Hey guys, it's Amber from NotableInk.com. Today I'm sharing one color palette and 5 media to make 5 cards. Media or techniques, however you want to look at it. So we're doing less intro and more just getting right to it today. As always, supplies will be listed below. We're starting off with Altenew String Art Heart Die. And at first, I wasn't really sure how to use this die. You can see it's a hot mess on the back. And the reason I don't have much footage for this is because I was out of frame for the majority of making this pattern because I kept sticking myself with the needle. So I needed to bring it towards me, and when I would do that, I would go out of frame. So I'm showing you the last little bit here so you can have an idea of how I do it. But I used 3 different colors of floss, and I started with the green in the middle with 5 strands of that. And I went from one opening to diagonal to the other side opening, if that makes sense. So I did 5 of the green, then 4 strands of coral, 4 strands of yellow, and then as I got closer to the center of the heart, I did 2 of green, 2 of coral, 2 of yellow, and you'll see that when I flip it around. I started off by just taping the ends, and then I decided I better tie knots, and here you can see the finished design there. So again, I just started in the middle and then went diagonally and went all the way around. To finish off the card, I added a sentiment from the Adore You stamp set and die cut some small hearts from black cardstock, and we have our card. So our color palette today is black, coral berry, chamomile, and olive crisp dye inks, and I'm going to use a couple different media from Altenew since all of their colors color coordinate, which is awesome. We're moving on to Dot Botanicals stamp set, and this coordinates perfectly with the previously released Dot Art stamp set. So if you have that, this is a great addition to that. So I'm just using one of the large dot stamps, and I'm going to white heat emboss that in the center of my card so I can do some ink blending. So we're just going to heat set that real quick, and you can't really see it because it's white embossing powder, also from Altenew. And so again, we're using the same color palette, but this time we're going to ink blend. And I'm going to start off with chamomile in the center, and these brushes, these blending brushes are from the Stamp Market. I really love these brushes because you're able to buy just one size. So I ended up getting 6 of the large size because I tend to get better results with the large brushes. But I also do have the inexpensive makeup brushes from Amazon, and I really do like having the very small sizes for particular techniques. So up to you. Here I have coral berry, and I'm just going to go ahead and blend that at the top. I'm not going to show all of the blending because I'm sure that you guys are familiar with how this goes. But what you can see is the Dot Botanical that I have in the middle, the embossing powder that's melted and heat set is resisting the ink blending. So that's going to be a very clear pattern. Once you're done with your ink blending, you just want to take a soft cloth and wipe off the top of the Dot Botanical to get any extra ink off of your embossing. So here you can see the color palettes here with different media. First we used string, now we're using inks. And I love how that turns out. I just put a sentiment on a black piece of cardstock for a strip down the center, and then added some Nouveau crystal drops in ebony just to add a little additional black. If I'm going to use black, I do like to have it in more than one area on the card. We're moving on to the Grateful Heart stamp set. This is a beautiful layering set, and I started with my outline in black, and I don't normally do that, but again, I wanted to keep my color palette consistent. So I started with the black outline, I did the second layer with chamomile, the third layer with coral berry, and now I've rock and rolled ruby red around the edges of that third layer stamp just to add a little more dimension and shadow. For the fourth layer, I'm using ruby red to deepen up those shadows, and I'm going to rock and roll that layer with grapevine so that I can get just a little bit more dimension. This is a technique that I love to do. This is a beautiful stamp set, but I want just a touch more dimension. So here I'm going back to that first most solid layer, and I'm adding I start with some chamomile around the edge, and then I'm going to come back in with another layer of marigold because that just wasn't quite dark enough. So just rock and roll your ink pad around the edges, and I'm just blending out the edges with a sponge dauber because I don't want any sharp edges. And it just adds a little something extra to your layer stamping. I used olive ink for the center of my flowers, and then I'm going to ink blend some olive ink onto an A2 size card panel. Over top the deco stencil, I'll have the specific product listed down below. So for the other flowers that are included in this set, they're just outlines. They're not layering stamps. So I went ahead and used my alcohol marker. So we're moving on to another media. Again, in the same colors. Well, not the exact same colors. I am using coral berry and ruby red, but for my yellows, I believe I'm using mango smoothie and one other lighter yellow. I'll have the specific colors listed in my blog post. And I did two different techniques. The first time I came in with the yellow first. Now I'm coming in with the darker colors first, the ruby red, the coral berry, and then I'm coming over the top with some mango smoothie. I'll show you the buds here. For the leaves, I used olive for my darkest color and then came in with bamboo for the lightest color. It's a very small area, so you don't need a lot of color in there. You certainly don't need 3 color blends. 2 is plenty to get some nice dimension to those flowers. And these are going to be layered behind the large blooms. But I love how the ink pads, the markers, and all of their different mediums color coordinate. So I'll die cut those, and here's the finished card there. I've added a sentiment, and then I've added some black splatter with Altenew Jet Black ink spray. Next up, we'll continue using artist markers with the Precious Peony stamp set, and this is a gorgeous stamp set. I love how the bouquets are already put together for you, so you don't need to use masking. Again, I'll have the colors I use listed in my blog post, but what I'm doing here is instead of using the normal flicking motion, I'm actually adding all of the color with dotting technique. So if you follow Alex Siberia, she does this technique, and I wanted to give it a try because I always think it's so beautiful when I see it on her projects. So I've decided to do that here. If you're not following Alex Siberia, I highly recommend it. She is incredibly talented and just creates gorgeous, gorgeous cards. So I'm just dotting all of the same colors that we've been using. We're using coral berry. I have a lighter color in there, either frosty pink or rouge, and then I've got some mango smoothie and then a lighter yellow here. So to fill in the major areas with yellow, I'm going to go ahead and do some flicking for that. And then that's going to dull down your dotting technique a little bit. It's going to blend out those areas. So then I'm going to come back in again with some full strength dots. These aren't going to be blended out. I'm going to add any additional ruby red where it needs to have a darker shadow. And then in order to quote unquote blend those areas out, I'll come in and do some dotting with the lighter pinks and some yellows as well. And I'm just going to show you the dotting technique on this one bloom because it's the same for all of the different elements. For the green, I use olive and bamboo. I might add a touch of moss in there for some darker colors, but it's all the same color families and the same technique throughout this whole image and the card. So here you can see the finished card here, and I love the muted, the more blended dots that are in the background with the more specific kind of dots with the harsh edges on the upside or on top of those. I think that adds a lot of dimension to these florals. I just added a sentiment to the middle, again a couple Nouveau drops to add some more black, and we're done. Now this time I've stamped my image on watercolor paper, and I have stamped it in Enchanted Gold ink. I thought it would be fun to try and do maybe some no-line watercoloring, but keeping, I don't know, a little bit of glitz and glam to my outline. So I've got some gold ink for my outline. Now, if I wanted to use another media, I could have used either the watercolor pans, which I have from Altenew, or the liquid watercolors, the watercolor brush markers. They also have the refills now that you can use straight from that. But I had the inks on my desk, or the ink pads on my desk already, so I went ahead and went with those. So I'm doing a wet to dry technique. So I've wet the petal with clean, clear water, and then I'm just dropping in the crisp dye ink with a watercolor brush. And I'm just doing a blend of the pink and yellow. And these are the only two petals that I'll show you of the floral, and then I'll move on to the leaves because the flower is done the exact same way. I did, after the first layer of flower petals was dry, come back in with a whole nother layer just to deepen up the tone of it, and I will show you that on the leaves because I do that on the leaves as well. So for the leaves, I'm doing a wet on dry technique. So the watercolor paper is dry, and I'm just bringing the wet paintbrush with the pigment on it to the paper. And here I've let this leaf dry, and then I'm coming back in with a second layer with the same color, that's olive ink, just to add some additional depth. I went ahead and die cut this, and I have added this to a black piece of cardstock, a white heat embossed sentiment, added white Nuvo drops this time, and then splattered it with pure white ink spray. And I had originally done a different panel, but I ended up using that in my washi hop the last time around. So here are all the cards together with the same color palette, 5 different media or techniques, however you want to look at it. And I hope that you enjoyed these projects today. I know this was a quick run through, but there was a lot of different things to get through. And if you want more in-depth instruction, I have lots of other videos on my channel with these techniques, with the exception of the string art. That one was new. So definitely join us on the hop. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to comment on my blog for a chance to win an Altenew gift certificate. Thanks so much for stopping by today, and if you haven't already, please subscribe down below.